I want to thank everyone. The Flower Avenue Green Street project has been very important to me since I've been on the council. We've raised over $2 million for the project. We should hopefully break ground by 2016. I thought it was 2015, but you know how these things are. But I want to thank all of you. This is very important. We want to make Flower Avenue a gateway. We want it to make it one of the best looking streets in the city of Takoma Park. So please, if you have any questions, this is the time to address the consultants that we have, WSSC, so that we can get the answers that you're looking for, whether it's the WSSC water main install, and if you guys have questions about the new route for ride-on, because we're going to change some of the bus stops, we should be able to answer those questions also. But thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Daryl Braithwaite.
Thanks. We've got a short presentation that our consultants with Rummel, Klepper, and Call will do. Hopefully they're familiar faces to you now, Rob Gillespie and Rick Adams. And we've also got with us tonight representatives from the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, Joshua Mazurek and Jeffrey Lorman. This is a first for us. I don't know how often WSSC does this, but we've got a real collaborative effort here with the water main work tying into the project. As Councilman Smith said, we've been successful in raising just about as much funds as we estimate needed for construction. Of course, it's still a moving target. We've got over $1 million from the Transportation Alternatives Program through the State Highway Administration. We got some money from the National Fish and Wildlife Federation for our bioretention facilities. The city is contributing $200,000 through the Community Development Block Grant monies for some lighting upgrades. And we've also confirmed that Montgomery County is giving $200,000 towards the project for the sidewalk portion, and that they agree to provide that money in 1 year. It had been split between 2 fiscal years, so that'll be coming in FY16. And I don't think I'm missing any other. Obviously, we started off with money from State Highway Administration to do the design, and then whatever was left from that money to do the resurfacing. So we've got substantial funding put together to move the project forward. We've got the 2 panel boards that give you some updates visually for those of us who like to see things. It's a little clearer sometimes when you can see it in living color. And so we'll just start with updates from what's changed since the last meeting. This is actually our 3rd meeting. And then wrap it up with a bit of a time frame, where we're looking now with the project, and then ask the folks from WSSC to come up and talk a bit about the water main project. So, Rob?
All right. Thank you, Daryl. So one of the things I wanted to highlight since our last meeting in April of 2013 is to reiterate the project goals that we discussed. So ADA compliant sidewalks on the east side of the road, just upgrading the sidewalk ramps on the west side, and as well as bus pads, making sure you have the 8-foot by 5-foot minimum bus pad at those bus stops. We have improved pedestrian crossings, and we've worked with Montgomery County Ride-On to modify and consolidate bus stop locations. Low impact stormwater management facilities, energy efficient lighting. So we'll go over those in more detail. The 2 big changes since the last meeting is WSSC came to us shortly after the last meeting and said, hey, we have a very old water main we want to replace, so we'd like to incorporate that into your project if we could. So we're working with WSSC and doing the design, and we're going to incorporate that into the project. Washington Gas came to us actually last week and said, hey, we want to replace the gas main too. So it's a good thing, I guess. Just kind of slow things down with the schedule a little bit maybe, but makes sense. So that's what we're going to do. Next slide, please. So the key changes, again, since April 23rd is WSSC is going to replace the water main and all the house service connections. And like I said, RKNK is going to do the design, and the design will be included as part of the contract documents for Flower Avenue, Green Street. Washington Gas is going to replace their gas and house service connections as well. And we're coordinating with Washington Gas now. We have a meeting with them this Friday, the city, and the goal is to replace the main, ideally prior to the construction of Flower Avenue, if not concurrent with. And so Jeff and Josh will be here after the presentation to answer any questions about construction of the water main you guys may have. Okay, next slide, please. So revisions to the concept since the last time is I've been working with NEMA with the city, and we've secured 7 easement agreements from property owners to construct sidewalk on private property, basically. We also ended up shifting the road center line west in 2 locations, from Domer Avenue south to approximately 8508 Flower and Hudson as well. They're shown on the plans over there. And the intent was to avoid right-of-way impacts on the east side. So that's one of the big changes. Now, that did affect parking. Last time there's approximately 100 spaces today on the west side of the road on street parking. The previous concept had eliminated 15 to 25 spaces, Piney Branch to Division Street. We did add 15 to 25 back, more spaces back between Division and Carroll, because currently there's no on-street parking out front here, but we're proposing to add parking in front of the school, and so we had a net loss of 0. However, with the current concept and the center line shifts, we're eliminating approximately 12 to 16 spaces. I will say that those center line shifts do occur where we're eliminating parking in front of apartment complexes and such. So there is off-street parking. It's not like we're taking parking in front of residential properties that rely on street parking only, don't have driveways. So, and one of the things we did is we removed the bump out. Unfortunately, there was we had a bump out on the west side of the road where we were proposing stormwater, and unfortunately there's a sanitary main that runs right underneath of it. So we'd have to relocate the sanitary in order to make that an infiltration practice. So we decided to take that out. So that's really I guess it just would change for parking and the geometric layout of the road since the last meeting. And next slide, please. Stormwater management. Just to reiterate, we're proposing linear infiltration ESD practices. ESD stands for Environmental Site Design, for those who don't know. And again, we're going to do geotechnical testing to make sure that the ground is sufficient to handle infiltration, because we're proposing basically when it rains, the water from the road collects into these facilities and allows for groundwater recharge. We don't have any under drain or any storm drain that are going to daylight into the inlets, the storm drain inlets. So there'll be some testing to verify that those are viable. But that's our approach for stormwater. Daryl mentioned we did receive additional funding, so that's good. We weren't sure how many facilities we could build last time, but it's like we'll be able to build several, more than, to exceed requirements for the project. So the previous concept, we had 16 locations, mostly along the east side of the road, and the bump out along the west side, which I mentioned previously that we've eliminated because of the sanitary impact. And there's 2 big ones proposed in front of the Adventist University here, stormwater locations. So again, that was previous concept. Next slide, please. So the current concept for stormwater, we have 13 to 14 locations, and they're all on the east side of the road. We had to eliminate 5 to 6 to avoid right-of-way and utility impacts. But we did, however, add 4 new locations that they're shown there, those property numbers, and those are reflected on the plan as well. We eliminated, like I said already, eliminated the one on the west side, and Washington Adventist University will remain. Those are 2 large facilities that those are important ones that we need for the treatment for the project. So that kind of sums up the stormwater. As an aside, I'll point out that we did hold an informational session for city residents to implement stormwater practices on their own properties, just an informational session that was held last September. And it wasn't as big of a turnout as we had hoped, but we made an effort and we were there, and so, okay, go ahead and break. Another big change was to the lighting design. One of the things that the city has been working with Pepco is we're going to replace the existing high-pressure sodium lights that are on these utility poles on the west side with LED lights. Now that's in addition to our proposed lighting on the east side of the road, which are going to be ornamental fixtures. We've worked with the city and selected a Munich fixture. Those are LEDs as well. So the good news is that we're talking about a uniform nighttime aesthetic. You're going to have white light. You're not going to have amber from the high-pressure sodium lights and white light from the Munichs. You're going to have a uniform white light, and you're going to have a lot more energy savings over time. So it's a good thing. I guess to summarize, we're adding 37 new Munich lights on the east side of the road of Flower Avenue. Fortunately, that allowed for, we did the photometric analysis on the lighting, that allowed for a reduction in 15 of the leased lights being the ones on the utility poles. The city leases the lighting from Pepco. So, and that summarizes the lighting. So next steps, receive everyone's feedback this evening. Start WSSC's water main design. We're at 30%, we're approaching 30% design. We just want to coordinate with WSSC and get a layout nailed down first in alignment, and perform the geotechnical evaluation as well, which is, like I said, to determine if the stormwater facilities can handle the infiltration practices, or allow for infiltration. And we anticipate completion of semifinal 65% design in December. And that pretty much sums it up. So anybody have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yes, sir.
Walk me through the water main replacement. Is that selective water mains, or it's just across
It's
the board?
across the board. We have Joshua here to speak for WSSC on behalf of WSSC, but they're replacing the entire water main along Flower Avenue between Piney Branch and Carroll Avenue, as well as the house connections, the house service connections.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at that in the past.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So does this design at all reduce the water runoff at all?
Yes.
By how much?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can get back to you on that.
That will depend
Yeah.
on if we can build all the ones that we have identified.
We're exceeding requirements for the project. I will say that. We are
Yeah, but the
exceeding treatment
requirements were
requirements.
just to stay the same. That the requirements were practically zero, even though we're calling this a green street. So I really want to know what we're actually retaining. And can we work with suggestions to possibly beef up these water retention, these bioretention areas so that they actually retain water, so that they're not just the way they're drawn here, which is the way they were submitted from the very beginning, which they were cut and pasted from, before this even began, when you people were chosen. These retention pictures where they're built up and they're actually not even capturing any water runoff. You know what I mean? The curbs aren't even cut. They're
Well-
just catching they're catching just the paving from right there. And they're not designed to actually hold more water, like with gravel underneath them, so that they can actually retain water.
Well, actually, they are.
I know you talked about that you haven't done the testing yet to show that, but
This is just a concept layout, and right now they're just shown as footprint right now, an area on the plan. We're not showing cross sections or details. I mean, we are proposing to handle.
so you'll show us that in
groundwater.
December, what you're
Yeah,
actually going to aim for.
Detailed
Because
design.
the way I
This
see
isn't
it,
detailed design.
this whole year and a half, 2 years, I've been working on this project with you guys for the beginning for 3 years. Nothing has changed. This has been the same things over and over and over. And and I know that the city is putting in these. They just put something on Maple Avenue. They put in that modular wetland on Maple Avenue, and that thing just backfired yesterday. I don't know if you guys know this, but after that 10-minute downpour, and I know it's not planted yet, the storm cover lifted up off of there because of the back of the water that poured into that. And I know that thing is designed to try to filter the water, but what we need to be doing is capturing the water. We need to be holding it. So if that thingy was actually designed in a way, and you put this huge, all this money in this giant concrete thing that was designed back in 2009 or 2008 in California, big, super over-engineered, wonderful ideas, when really what we need to do is just stop some of the water that's running off by building cisterns or throwing gravel under there and letting it perk and then piping it after it sits for 48 hours.
We have sites identified, what do you say, 13 or 14 sites. Once the geotechnical work is done, we'll know how many of those actually have percolation, will actually allow water to filtrate through the soil. And once those are identified, then they'll further do the designs and we'll be able to get those calculations to you.
Okay.
The bioretention basins themselves will be dug several feet below the surface, and we'll have gravel and other layers in there so that water is held underneath. They're not just a depression in the earth with planting. So they will be designed, but it's a little premature at this point. We're not going to be able to give you answers to that. I know
But you've
they've
been putting these
located-
things in the past few years, so you do know kind of what the situation is.
Well, yeah, but we don't
I
know
mean-
how many of these we're going to be able to construct and how large we're going to be able to construct. There's several factors that we have to take into account.
I honestly
Obviously,
doubt
first
they're
is-
over constructing them.
Can I
You know,
please finish?
they could be so much less money if you just did them so simply.
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to figure out if there's percolation. Once we confirm that, then we need to work with the utility companies that are very specific as to what can happen above their water lines, sewer lines, and gas lines. So we're coordinating with them. WSSC has been very receptive to working with us on those types of things. But they do have legitimate concerns. When you have a sewer line, you don't want to have water, from rain infiltrating into the sewer lines. And,
But that's what that
one
water
of
is
them-
doing on that other one, where you're
One
gonna
of
have
them.
to screw, you guys are gonna have to bolt those tops down because so much water pressure is happening. And, it's just sort of defeating the entire purpose. And I don't know what that thing costs. I'd like to get the numbers on what that.
You can contact the city engineer who's designed that project. I mean, we're talking here on Flower Avenue. So I don't mean to put you off, but once we get the infiltration testing done and can do the designs, we'll have all that information available that'll tell you exactly what we think we're going to be able to capture, how much water it will hold, those types of things. So we'll be able to
Because
get that
otherwise it's a
information.
farce even calling this a Green Street, honestly. Honest to God. You
So I
can
think
put a
we
green
kind of
line
beat
on it
that.
and send it out there and say we're doing a Green
Yeah.
Street, but you're honestly not doing a Green Street. You're using the money to redo the street, and that's a beautiful thing. But, 50 years ago, we should have been doing this stuff, and we've got to stop this water.
Well, I think we've covered
not
the
call it Green Street
bioretention
then.
facility
But-
piece of it. We've got other parts of the project.
Sean,
that are
I'll just
interested.
say that the stormwater design is being done in accordance with current state and city
Yeah, current state
practices.
cities is backwards. I'm
Well, that's
working
an
on green
opinion,
roofs
that's
right
an
now in
opinion you
Baltimore.
have, and, we
No, it's
understand
not
what
an
you-
opinion, it's
Okay.
like a fact. You guys are doing things that you're not willing to push the envelope and do the next things that should have been done 10 years ago or yesterday.
These are the latest practices that
These
everybody's
latest practices
utilizing.
are farcical, like that thing is over-engineered. It's like, yes, they sold you this idea.
Well, we're not proposing that facility for the Flower Avenue. We're proposing something entirely different. So as we have
Because
this
any
new
water
topography
perking
of them-
through gravel will take out the particulates and the phosphorus. They have this huge, great scientific arguments for why they put this modular wetland, which is a concrete tank. Like,
Are you an engineer?
I'm a landscape architect. This is what I do for a living.
As
Not
I said,
just blowing it going
I
up.
think we've covered the bioretention, as much information as we can give you right now. So I'd like to change the topic into the other pieces of the project so that if other folks.
Yeah, they're all
have comments or
fabulous, but I just
questions-
really want to keep everyone aware of the fact that we need to keep this seriously being green. And I want to really see really green results. I don't want pretend green. I don't want just calling it green. If you're going to take money and say you're doing something green, let's really do it green for cheap.
Can I help you?
Oh, yeah, a request. I'm new to the neighborhood and very new to this whole thing, but in the spirit of effective logical discourse, could everyone get a chance to finish? They haven't finished a single one of their points without getting interrupted. by you.
Okay, yeah. You haven't been working on this for 3 years either.
Doesn't
I know
matter.
you're brand new.
It's not relevant.
Daryl, a quick question and a quick comment. I hate to go back to the stormwater thing, but this was a pre-existing question. You mentioned that you're changing the number of retention sites, but there really wasn't much information in terms of square footage. How does the original plan and the new plan compare in terms of 10% less, 10% more, 20% less, 20% more, that sort of thing?
Right, we're exceeding requirements for the project. I will say that, we did a stormwater
I
report.
mean, I'm comparing the two. Okay. I'm not looking for talking points, I'm just wondering how
Well, the
visual
original,
concept.
I mean, I can only say that the original proposal from RKK assumed design of 3 to 4 facilities that would manage all the stormwater required based on the new impervious area. We're now looking at 13 to 14. Now, of course, that's not apples to apples. They're all not the same size. Each one gets fit based on where we have space, but significantly more than what was originally
Right.
intended.
And I would say it's in the same ballpark as what we had last time. I don't think it's a big difference.
No, that's just really helpful.
Right.
The other thing I'd mention is I'm really glad that you guys are coordinating the utilities, because one of the things, and I know this has been a frustration of yours, Daryl, and as a resident, you guys do beautiful street paving, and then the utility companies, Pepco, WSSC, come in, screw it up, and then what they put back doesn't come anywhere near the quality of the pavement that was there before. So please don't let them screw up your nice work that you guys are going to do.
No, they've been very cooperative, actually, so it's, I think we got a good approach.
Any more questions?
The lighting, is all geared for car traffic or pedestrian traffic?
Both.
Both.
Pedestrian and street and parking.
And did you calculate the energy savings to change the LEDs?
We have those numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head, but we did look into those. Yes.
Which is usually like a factor of 5 or 10.
It's substantial over the long term. Yes.
We don't have any other LED streetlights in the city yet, so this will be a first for the streetlight approach. Though if you're driving around these days, a lot of commercial places have them. We just recently revamped the community center. If you want to get a sense of the LED type light, it's on the exterior as well as on the interior of the community center on Maple Avenue. It is a wider looking light, and as has been mentioned, extremely efficient. In addition to the efficiency, it's also got a much longer life, so like 5 or 10 times the lifespan. So the amount of light outages should be greatly reduced because they're supposed to last for 10 plus years.
Are we going to own those?
The Munich lights, the ornamental lights will be owned by the city because we'll be putting them in through an underground conduit. The Pepco will be doing the lights on the utility poles through their relamping program. We're working with them, NEMA's been working with them to try to see if we can't get a partial funding assistance to help bring the cost down for the conversion from the high-pressure sodium existing lights to the LEDs.
And the Munich lights look dark sky compliant, are they?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's a standard to keep light pollution and, dimming the ability to see the stars, so it basically shoots the light down at the ground versus up into the sky.
How big is the gas main?
I think it's a 2-inch plastic. Right now, it's an old cast iron pipe, I think. I don't know what they're going to propose yet. We're going to.
But it's just local distribution, it's not transmission.
I believe it's a low pressure system and it's a local. Yes.
Are they building it or is it going on your contract?
That's
We
what
don't
we're-
know yet.
We just found out last week that Washington Gas wants to replace their main. So, yeah, it's kind of a
I
surprise.
had conversations with them
We've
for
asked
2
them.
years that they weren't
Right.
going to change it, and now they've decided they are, which is a good thing to get back to Joe's point that, so that 2 years from now they won't want to cut up the road after we've all been finished. I don't know if you folks from WSSC can tell us a bit about the existing infrastructure and what is typically likely to be changed, if you're changing water line size or any of that.
Sure. This has been a great opportunity for WSSC and the city to coordinate. The existing mains in Flower Avenue are from 1918 to the mid-1920s. So they are very rapidly or have already reached the end of their service life. So we have been trying to get these replaced for a while, and this just happened to work out perfectly that we can coordinate together. So as you mentioned with paving, this is all going to be coordinated with the city. And it's been great because we're working with the same designer, so our schedules can be coordinated easily. Right now, the existing infrastructure is 8 and 12 inch, between 8 and 12 inch diameter, and it will be replaced as the same, and house connections will be replaced up to the property line. So that kind of summarizes the water components of it. Are there any specific questions? Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't know if you see this, but I hit a utility patch today and I went down trying to work. Now, it wasn't in the city of Takoma Park, but I can assure you I've had close calls in the city too. Any way you can get your contractors on this project or other projects to actually do a better job when they patch?
I mean, you can contact WSSC and report that. That would be something that would be very useful for them to know and be aware of it. But like I say, it's going to be very closely coordinated with the city, with paving.
Yeah, can you just give me a little sense of the scope of this? And so what, this is every single house all the way between Carroll?
Well, yeah, the limits are between Carroll and Piney Branch. It's 1.02 miles.
Okay.
And so between that stretch, the house connections from the main to the property line will be replaced.
Okay.
Anything WSSC doesn't replace beyond the property line, that's the homeowner's responsibility. But we'll be going through the extent of the project, replacing that.
So what's your timetable? I'm kind of curious what the road closure situation might potentially look like for this.
Scheduling is difficult at this point to say, but the whole road isn't going to be closed at once. It's going to be going through segments.
It's going to be like a flag operation. We won't close the road.
Well, yeah, it's funny because they've done these sporadically over the past few years, probably on a case-by-case basis if something was blown up. So then they cut like a 6-foot by 4-foot chunk, and then they patch it up again. They keep going like he's talking about. And so, but I've never really seen it done systematically. It seems more opportunistic. So this looks like the first time anybody's addressed this as a whole system-wide thing. So
Yeah, what we
curious what that
would anticipate kind of going a block, the water main would proceed pretty much the curb and the sidewalk, so a block went through the water main, they would keep moving down the street, and then the road portion might start where the water main finished, and finish all the curb and sidewalk, and then all the paving would be done at the end, so you got a nice paved finish, and you're not going to be tearing things up again to do the utility work, so.
Is the line going to be replaced in the same location, or will
That-
you excavate, remove, and put a new one in, or?
That has to be determined through the design.
We'll be looking at that.
30%, yeah, we're still looking at it.
They did Piney Branch about 7 or 8 years ago from almost the whole stretch to Takoma Park, and that one went really smooth. I can't remember who the contractor was. But that was like a 20-inch main, which is a big deal.
Yes.
A couple of points. One, I understand that Sligo Bridge is going to be replaced, and there will be a major detour. And with any luck, it will coincide with what you're doing. And the other point is that I read something that if there's any money left, we might improve the bus stops. And as a bus rider, may I say that there is no substitute for a bus shelter. And you may have to get easements or I don't know what, but it's really nice to have a roof over your head while you're waiting for the bus on a rainy day.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? We don't currently have any bus shelters planned in the project. What we have planned in the project are larger bus paths so that both the front and back door, people will have access to, concrete surfaces to come in and out. And we're doing the bus locations in areas that are preceding the intersections, so to help with traffic and drivers, There's also going to be a bump out so that at each of the intersections, so where the bus stops, it's in the drive lane. We are looking, the city currently has a contract for bus shelters that's expired. You've probably seen them around, they have the advertising on the bus shelters. So the city's currently in negotiations with that contractor to see if they can upgrade the existing shelters, and we'll start talking to them about options. We'd definitely like to see shelters on Flower Avenue. As you mentioned, we've got some right-of-way limitations, particularly on the west side of the street where the property boundary is really just right along the sidewalk. But there may be some places, like I'm thinking at Flower and Erie, where there's a little more room and where we can move that out. Looks like Jared has some additional information.
The city just submitted a grant application to the Community Legacy Grant Program for $120,000 to build bus shelters on Flower Avenue. There's no guarantee we're getting it, but I've heard you. I know that residents want bus shelters, so we are looking for the money to build bus shelters. So we probably will see them, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, and it may be at a later phase. One of the things that it might, again, offer an opportunity is people have been talking about making Flower Avenue kind of a location by its appearance, and certainly some of the improvements will help do that. We can add street furnishing, art, and the bus shelters might be a part of that. So the city could potentially even commission a bus shelter that had a little less of a profile, so it provided you the cover, but wasn't as large as, 8 or 9 feet wide and 3 or 4 feet back as some of the others. So there may be some opportunities there to commission pieces.
I can show you a small one up at Four Corners, by the way. But unless I'm mistaken, on the northbound side of Flower, the space for a bus shelter would be outside the city limits. And I hope you can figure that out.
Well, if there are, and you can see on the map on that northbound lane where the right-of-way boundary is adjusted, so there may be some locations that might coincide where we still have right-of-way behind the proposed sidewalk. So we may have some locations. It won't be all of them, but there may be some where we have the property. Any other topics that people wanted to raise that haven't been raised yet?
Very simple question for WSSC, and if you don't know the answer right now because it's too early, it's not a problem. When doing the water main replacement, how long do you expect the interruption of service to any particular home to be? It's the first reason.
We minimize it to like an 8-hour shutdown. But it depends on what's done, but that's generally done at night and off hours.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
Way better.
we've tried to minimize any disruption to local service.
Daryl, two quick follow-up questions. One, what accommodations would be made in the project for bicycle traffic on Flower?
Well, that issue was raised by Councilman Smith last night. Because of the limited roadway, we can't do a bike shared lane. What we are looking at is signage that's there that says bike share the road. So we'll try to have appropriate signage at either end as well as potentially along the 1 mile stretch that reminds drivers to share the road with bikes.
What about painted sharrows?
There's not enough, our lane width is sometimes 10 and sometimes 11 feet, so there's not sufficient width to do any kind of markings in the roadway for bikes.
But the concept of a sharrow is it's a shared space for bikes and cars, thus not, it's painted when the lanes aren't wide enough for a separate
Yeah.
lane.
I think that's when the lanes are 15 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And now beyond that, then there's and I think you could see it on some sections of 410. It has signage that says bike share the road. This is all established by
I'll
the,
talk to you about it.
yeah.
The second thing is sight lines from the side streets are particularly bad, so cars pulling up can't see very well traffic coming. Are you specifically going to look at that issue when?
Yeah, I think that's been incorporated in the plan from the first community meeting. The additional bike stop signs is as outgrowth of the comments made by the community at those meetings. And the bump outs are largely at the intersections to allow cars to have that 3 or 4 feet additional space to move forward so they can see in either direction. So I think we'll be greatly improving the sight lines for those cars that, approaching Flower Avenue from either side.
If it turns out that the bump outs increase sight lines to the point that the extra stop signs become superfluous, is there an easy way to back some of those out?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's always hard to remove. Well, it's hard either way. Hard to add a traffic calming feature, hard to get rid of a traffic calming feature. So I think that would be kind of a topic for the neighborhood and your council person. If once they were in place, people really were unhappy with that, then that would be kind of a community discussion. Traffic calming in the bump outs and the speed humps and traffic circles, that's a community-driven process that has petitions and council approval. The signage is actually something that's only authorized by the city manager. Now, they don't typically just decide to put in signs unless there's been a big public request. But it's, it at least on paper, doesn't have the type of requirements for public hearings and, majority opinion to put in traffic signage. So that said, it's probably going to be one of those things like speed bumps where you either love it or you hate it. And
I'm a fan of speed humps. I lived in Adams Morgan when they put in the humps on, wow, how did I forget the name of the road already? Tilden.
uh-huh.
And, cars used to go ripping down
Yeah.
to try to make the light.
Yeah.
And my, what a difference. Took a while for everyone to bottom out several times. But you could have made a drinking game out of it. Every time you did a slam of someone hitting one.
Learning curve, yeah. Yeah.
So the traffic stops obviously will reduce the, the speeds, and I don't know what everybody else observed, but I haven't observed any excessive speeds generally in Flower Avenue. I know there's some site problems perhaps, and maybe bump outs will address that, but wouldn't it be a bad idea just to start with bump outs first and see if those do the job?
I know what I was wondering.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just add after that, if you put the stop signs, as you said, very difficult to retract them. They'll stand there for the next 50 years or so. So maybe you start with bump outs first, because, I live here, I have 3 kids, and yes, I'm careful crossing the street, but as I mentioned before, the only speeding cars are traffic, cops or
We had some traffic data from State Highway, which, if I'm not mistaken, indicated that 80% of the cars were driving 10 miles over the speed limit when that evaluation was done. So we haven't done anything else ourselves or as part of this project. So we have some data
Has there
that.
been any, accidents that show that, traffic, stop signs?
I don't think there was significant accident
The
data
stop
on
signs,
Flower.
the stop signs are proposed to help with the sight lines and the sight distance. The traffic volumes didn't warrant the stop signs.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I think bump outs first would be,
Right.
if bump outs don't do the job, of course.
Yeah.
But, because this is actually, we'll have increased traffic here because of extra stop signs. In the mornings, Mondays, we have a lot of traffic coming from Piney Branch into here to the, to hospital. We do have a hospital that has a lot of employees. And if you have sometimes a bus that will back up several blocks,
Yeah.
and if we have, in addition to that, several stop signs, it's going to actually create more traffic in my opinion.
One of the issues that the stop signs was addressing, that we had complaints from too, was that people were complaining on the side streets when they were making those turns that the folks behind the buses were actually going around them across the yellow line illegally. And so the stop sign should help alleviate some of that, since they can't just blow by the buses without a stop sign. So
Well,
we think it'll help address
They
some of
still do
issue
that
as well.
on Houston Avenue. The bus stops, if they're letting people out, people go around all the time. So I'm not sure how much.
Well, I'm
it
just
will-
saying with a stop sign,
Yeah.
they'll be pushing the envelope a little bit.
And there is a stop sign on Houston Avenue.
Oh, to Houston, yes.
Yeah, on Houston Avenue, there's a stop sign,
They
there's a
still
bus
go around.
stop, and people do go around. I mean, so that's my biggest concern.
Well, I think we can take that comment and just, again, discuss it with your neighbors and see if that's the sense or feedback we're getting from the neighborhood. This is really, at this point, still being very much massaged and developed based on community requests. So it's a good time to raise those issues.
A couple follow-up comments on the stop sign issue. I live on the corner there at Houston where the existing stop sign is, and I would say, there's a lot of people that don't know that there's a stop sign there, and they're blasting through. And if I come up off of Houston there, I mean, I always have to stop and make sure the other car is really going to stop before I go. And the other thing is that it's really loud. People, I guess you said people aren't really speeding on the road, but there are a lot of people that feel they need to accelerate as quickly as they can off that stop. And it's really actually pretty loud, the way people rev their engines going through there.
All additional stop signs probably will add
Yeah.
noise level.
You increase the noise, I think.
With the bump outs, the stop signs will have more visibility at the street, so it might provide some assistance to that visibility of the stop signs for the drivers.
I have a question to dovetail, a follow-up to the question this gentleman asked 10 minutes ago. So the breaking ground 2016, is that to coincide with the bridge repairs?
We hope to start before 2016, but I'm always an optimist. So the State Highway currently is saying that they think they'll be ready to go to construction in the spring or summer of 2015 for the Carroll Avenue Bridge. And they're looking at a 12 to 18 month construction cycle. And that's about as much detail as we have in terms of their time frame. They're waiting for a few things. They're waiting for the New Hampshire and Sligo Creek Bridge to be completed before they start any construction. They're finalizing their design plans now, and then they'll have to go out to bid, and then they'll have to award a contract, and the person will have to start. The other piece of it is that the initial project that they'll be doing is building a pedestrian bridge, which will take some time. So even once they start, there'll be a lead time before it actually closes the bridge for construction. So we just need to keep communicating with them. The detour plan, excuse me, for the bridge will be providing Maryland National Capital Park and Planning continues to agree to this, and they have said yes to the past. There'll be the use of Old Carroll off of Carroll Avenue if you're coming north, Old Carroll to Sligo Creek to Maple to Maplewood to Flower, and then back to Carroll, and then that in reverse for southbound traffic. So the Maplewood intersection will be heavily impacted by the Flower Avenue Bridge, the Carroll Avenue Bridge work. And State Highway is proposing to do a three-way stop at that intersection, a temporary one, just to deal with the additional traffic. They're also proposing 2 temporary traffic signals at Maple and the hospital driveway, and at Maple and Sligo Creek. And then there'll also be a 3-way stop at Old Carroll and Sligo Creek Parkway. So there'll be temporary 2 signals and 2 3-way traffic stops to address the traffic. There'll also be a larger detour which will direct cars coming on 410 at Carroll and Ethan Allen to continue on 410 to Philadelphia, and then do Philadelphia, Maple, Maplewood, Flower. So, here at Flower and Maplewood, you're going to get the traffic no matter what, whichever detour route people use. So all those cars will be flowing through there. In order to help facilitate that, they're recommending that there be no parking on the one side of Maplewood. There's currently permit parking on the north side, and might even be both sides, but anyway, so that the south side would have no parking in order to provide a little more space for the cars to pass. But, all that being said, State Highway's working on their project, we're working on ours. We know we have quite a bit of work left to do in terms of finalizing design, as well as developing the utility work. We may now have a new wrinkle with Washington Gas utility work. And some of the funding sources we have an extensive review process, so just getting our documents, once they're finalized, reviewed by State Highway Administration and approved. We have to pull all permits before we go out to bid, which is will add some time to the project. So we'll have a lot of prep time even once we get the final design.
Daryl, any chance you can arm twist Pepco, since you've got the street open, and WSSC and Washington Gas are putting in the street, to get Pepco to put their power lines in the street?
Well, I think Pepco has already spent quite a bit of money raising their utility poles on Flower Avenue, so the entire street has got elevated poles and new lines. So I think they've saved, as they do, they've kind of picked their technology, which is to go higher, and that's what they're doing. We didn't even consider the undergrounding of utility lines. Again, one of the things we have here, and if you look on the plans, you can see the small footprint and the amount of underground facilities between sewer, water, and gas. It's really tight. So to add electric under there would be a challenge for sure. That likely wouldn't be in the street, but would have to be under the sidewalk areas. And then the property owners would have the cost of having to connect to that underground service line back to their house. So adds a whole new universe of complexity that we hadn't added in this project.
Not to mention it'll cost a very large amount of money.
That's a
to do
big,
that,
big ticket.
to relocate.
Uh,
Yeah. Very expensive.
So as long as you're off money, two things. What's the cost share with WSSC? And then I saw on the website that you're negotiating some scope creep items and more design fees, but I didn't see construction management listed in there. I don't know what the vision is who's doing construction management.
We assume that RKK will take a piece of construction management.
That's going to be a whole another fee to
Yeah.
negotiate.
WSSC is probably better suited. I've been learning about betterment and enhancement, and the terminology still escapes me, but we have talked with WSSC about costs. Do you comfortable, or you want me to wing it?
I don't actually know the percentage of what it works out to, where we're actually impacted, but the majority of it's betterment, which the commission's paying for.
Good. Because I pay rates there. I don't want to pay rates there.
Yeah. We've worked to try to minimize all the, with the ESDs and things like that, we moved around where we had minimal impacts, which reduced our cost share that we have an agreement with the city with. So the majority of it's going to be better than where it was just.
Any other topics we haven't touched on? Well, in terms of next steps, as we said, we hope to have design at 65% by the end of the year. I would foresee potentially, having another community meeting just to update you all after that. And hopefully things will be, we'll have a lot more information about the bioretention aspects of it. The water main work will be developing. We'll have an answer on the gas line work. I think now what we have is a pretty clear sense of where the roadway is going to be, where the sidewalk's going to be. Those things are getting pretty close to final, if to use the term. Well, again, thank you all for coming out. We will have, we'll continue to update the webpage, and all this information from tonight will be on it, including the video. So you can encourage your neighbors who weren't able to come to review the slides and watch the video. They can fast forward through the parts that they. It's a nice way to kind of get exposed. And then, of course, if they have any other questions, they can contact me. We'll just continue on.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. This is probably the biggest project in the city for many years, so look forward to it being completed. Thank you.